as a developers, how often do you talk about like how green is your code? Is there any like, you know, requirements for environmental requirements? No? Oh no. Oh no, we come nowhere. Okay, let's start about talking about AI, emissions of AI, and obviously I guess we know it has been calculated of like emissions for the AI and ICT sector in general. I'm sure cryptocurrency is one of the bad guys, but yeah, how do you feel about this?
If I start, one thing that I didn't talk in my presentation is that when you are thinking of those emissions of your solutions, that's the footprint. That's the emissions that your solution itself does. But then there is always the other thing that is called handprint, that what kind of things you can actually save by using that. Now, if I'm thinking yesterday's example of this AI alarm clock, I don't see too much of a handprint over there. That's mainly footprint. But if you are changing something that then saves in other places, like you have a GPS navigator, it has some embodied carbon emissions, but it helps you to drive shorter distances, etc. So it has a handprint and as such, improvement as such. So although AI takes a lot of energy, we will see that it also has some positive effects.
Oh, that's a surprise. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, AI is going to have practical use cases, unlike crypto was something that I just saw come and go, but AI is in the stage of let's put it on everything and then we'll scale back once we actually know where it's most applicable. And it is nice to see AI pushed into consumer devices because people are immediately hit with, it took 10 seconds to run that query and that's not going to work for me for this practical use case. And AI people are going to be forced to say, let's use more efficient languages, let's use different models. Maybe don't use AI at all and just use an algorithm for this piece. So consumers are kind of this forcing function to make things faster. And as I was kind of trying to demo, the efficiency of something can be correlated with the energy that it's putting out. Not perfectly, but it's a good proxy. So I think pushing it really aggressively into people's hands is going to force it to be smarter and a little bit faster. But until then, it is being applied to too many things probably, and I hope that does scale back depending on need.
Yeah. Do you think we can trust emission reports, from the big actors like AWS and whatnot?
If I'm answering to that, I was discussing this with Ben already before. And quite many of those tools also that my students found are showing some CO2 emissions. And some tools help you to reduce your emissions by moving it to a cloud that is more green. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that our current energy usage is growing more than the increase of green energy. And if some company is saying that, hey, we are using only green energy, then somebody else is not. It's a zero-sum game. And I don't like that somebody says that we are completely carbon-free because we are using green energy as such. I would love to see, like in Google's case, that, hey, what is your energy usage now? How many kilowatt hours? Mm. What it is or what was it 5 years ago? Now it's 200% more. So and then you still say that you are really running green. I wouldn't say. I would rather look at the energy usage and then the depending where you are really running the service. Of course, it has a matter, and if you can have then the possibility when you have optimized your energy usage, then run it in the place that is most greenest energy using place. Some cloud in some Nordic countries, like in Sweden, they have a lot of hydropower over there that basically gives them green energy. Then that's the way of doing it. But for me, it's kind of a greenwashing.
Mm-hmm. So you mean measuring things in terms of like the kilowatts being pumped out instead of CO2?
Yes.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, we talked yesterday a bit about edge computing. Is edge computing better than centralized data centers?
Yeah, it's a tough one to pin down. It's why I didn't use like Cloudflare for the practical example, because yeah, if we know we're running hardware on this AWS region, we can probably figure out how much that CPU is going to affect the wattage that's being used. But if you spread that out over like any, usually a CDN is what it is, which is not necessarily a more efficient server, but it's usually one closer to a user. And the goal is to reduce like the actual network latency to get from where the thing's computed to where the user is. But as we were kind of talking about, network usage isn't a massive factor. It's more the amount of compute that's going on. So I would think there's some benefit to, like Edge has a restricted runtime where you can only ship certain things. So it kind of forces the developer to make things super efficient because they can't even deploy to production with a certain bundle size or a certain CPU amount. So it does force you to have better practices. But once it's on that machine, it's probably running it about the same. You'd have to actually look at the providers to know. And I didn't get metrics on like CDN and edge providers, so I wouldn't know how that part works.
I have one example on this edge computing. Yesterday, I think somebody was saying that there is no need for edge computing because the user experience of using the cloud is fast enough, if I remember that correctly from yesterday's presentations. But some years back, one of my students was doing an experiment where we were looking at offloading some computation from your mobile into some resource that is close by. We can call that edge as such. And in the end, selecting a suitable computational platform for the problem was actually more energy efficient, and it was even faster than doing everything on your device in your mobile phone. Even when we were considering and calculating all the energy that was required for the data transfer and the computation in that server and mobile phone. But it depended a lot because mobile phones, we found out that even if you have different models from the same manufacturer, it depends a lot of the hardware configuration that they have, what kind of a processors, memories, and whatsoever they have, what kind of a communication chips they have. Some were more efficient, some were not. It was really complex case.
I think since this is a future front-end conference, there's a lot of front-end developers. But developers in general, what would be like the first concrete steps that we can take? Or is there like anything? I mean, I'm a developer, I get the design, and then there's a video, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do it, it's too much. But is there some like actual things that we can do?
Yeah, I mean, I hope there's at least one thing. I mean, there's so many different pieces. I do definitely appreciate services that tell you, PlanetScale is one example, where they're a SQL provider. And every week they give you an analytics metric of these are all the queries that were run. These are the ones taking 200 milliseconds. These are the ones taking 20. And you should probably optimize the one that's taking 200 milliseconds. That's a really great call to action to say the first step to optimizing this thing is going to be going to the database level, optimizing that query so that all of our traffic can be rendered faster. And that's usually how I end up building apps, is starting from the lowest part, usually the database, then looking at making the server more efficient, and then making the client more efficient. There's no need to walk one way or the other. I just tend to work with a lot of server-driven apps. So just looking at those metrics and knowing how much cost there is to compute certain things, you'll notice all sorts of places where you're just writing really inefficient code that should probably be improved. So that's where I usually like to track it. Because also on the server, it's something that you own. You know the hardware, you know the SQL server that you're running. It's more controlled, it's more approachable to like get a metric you could bring to a product manager and say, we sped up users by this amount, and it's going to improve usage in our analytics by this much. It's really like, boom, here's the cause and effect. And the client part is a little bit more gooey because you got to open up your browser dev tools to figure out how efficient is this React app, which is getting better, but it's a harder piece to figure out.
Yeah, anything you want to add, Jari?
So the question was, what kind of a green steps can the developers take?
Yeah.
First, I would like to recommend that look at the Janne's book. Janne has a nice high-level kind of what was the word, Janne, that you were using for was it waste or what kind of a waste we are basically using for, and then there is some guidelines. But the other thing that I want to actually mention is that the responsibility of doing things is actually, I would say that it's distributed to many players. I really hope that the cloud providers would develop their kind of approaches in such a way that the developers can see much more data from there, because they are providing the platform, so the platform itself could provide you much more stuff. And then, of course, I had pretty nice discussions here with the company representatives, is that within the companies, within the developers, there are always some senior people who kind of give those guidelines and so on, and creating this kind of guidelines, how to make things as efficient as possible. I would say that it's already there. Now just considering that if we can measure any of the energy usage and then also consider that, and creating those guidelines is one way forward.
Back in the day when testing wasn't like taken, how do you say, by default, we had to kind of sell to the business owners that, okay, this is why you want to pay for testing. But how about like this green point of view? Like how, okay, maybe there are like some like, concrete measurements, like you can measure that, okay, you will be saving for this, but I mean, like, I feel like sometimes the business owners or someone who's paying the bills might think that, okay, this is, extra, you're spending extra time of like creating requirements, or, how could you sell or help us sell this idea? So
your question is, how do you sell that you invest in making things as efficient as possible? I would say that Motiva at the moment is creating this kind of a green criteria for software. And in our previous Midvidi project, there was basically the customers and the producers working together in such a way that how can we measure things that can be put as criteria in a procurement document in such a way that when there is this kind of a competition that we want to have this kind of a software, then there can be some criteria that can be measured in such a way that we would not be comparing apples and bananas as such. So Motiva is working on those things these days. And I have to say that it's not me only who is working on this. Tieke in Finland is really active. We have a lot of companies working with us, and of course, if the companies are really interested in working with universities, then I really encourage to contact us, because the master's program that we are working with companies and doing different things with the companies, and we always need some cases for the students.
That's interesting. Ben, what do you think? Is there like a greenest framework to use? Is there like a way to introduce better ways or greener ways to do things without doing like some major changes?
Without doing major changes, that's the big one. Because the easy answer is just use Astro for everything. And there you go. But asking for a framework rewrite is a lot. And it's usually best to focus on high traffic areas or very specific areas where something can be improved. I know that at my last company, we were using a client-side application for everything on an e-commerce site, but we were also using it for home pages and call-outs for new products that were linked straight from Instagram and other places. And when you're coming from those high traffic regions, it really matters how quick that page pulls up And if you're trying to spin up a Create React app that gets a 10 on Lighthouse scores, it actually was a 10, it can definitely hurt conversion for people that are visiting that product and they want to go buy it. So if you focus it on, OK, there's this one product showcase, we're launching it tomorrow, and we really want this thing to be snappy. We're going to just use like the most bare bones tools to build that piece. Astro is one option. There's also Hugo, Eleventy, all these other static site builders that can just take your content, maybe render with React, and just flatten it to straight HTML being sent over to Wire. And the difference being, are you running a bunch of scripting to make the web page load, or are you running very little? And how much analytics are you gating in front of it? There's a lot of analytics cost. I know that Partytown is one really great tool that just kind of runs your analytics in a worker in the background, but it keeps everything the same way. So it's a very simple refactor that you can just toss on and go off to the races. So scoping things down to where you actually want to make those improvements and doing very minimal refactors to get there. Try to keep what you have.
Let me add here. Although I don't go into that level, but just saying that now that the companies start considering doing this energy efficiency and measuring things, even though that you had the comparison of different providers as such in your place, but at the moment the companies do not have these figures. And if you open up things and say that, hey, this is how we are measuring, this is our measure, and then you are showing how you are advancing on the next version, that, hey, we have improved 20% of our energy usage and so on. That's one way of doing it, as long as we don't have these, let's say, metrics that fit for all.
And obviously, I think we all know that videos are really, really bad. But I think images are quite, basic thing on the web. And especially if you have like web stores, how are you going to sell something, without images? But the question is that what's the best way to make the image-heavy websites greener?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to image optimization most of the time. There's all sorts of services to do that. By image optimization, I mean, can you, compress things? Can you serve in optimal formats like WebP or AVIF? And can you do it in a backwards compatible way? Usually by having multiple formats generated, and then the browser can choose the smallest one that it's able to render. There's tools that automate that process. There's really low-level tools like Eleventy image, which is, you would think, would be scoped to their framework. It's built into a different framework. But it's this very general-purpose JavaScript tool that just takes in an image and generates new files for you. It's just a one-to-one. You can run it across any images locally, and it just kind of works. It's actually what Astro recommended for a long time when we didn't have image optimization, was just go use this tool. It's really simple. But you can also use Cloudinary and other CDN-based services that can let you upload images, and then based on where the user is coming from and query params you add, it can also make that optimized. So those are two options that come to mind if you're in like the JavaScript space.
Not only the figures and videos, but some of those carbon website calculators, they also go through all those different categories, scripts and ads and whatsoever. Yeah. And for example, the Aalto University made this kind of I should have the link somewhere, but a website calculator that was basically breaking up everything and then showing that, hey, this is where you are doing bad and this is where you are doing good. Mm-hmm. And quite a many pages, they went through, I think, 500, 1,000 Finnish city and company websites, and then they have a very good kind of a comparison over there that whenever you are driving through all those websites, you can see that how you actually fit there and where is your pain points.
Gotcha. Is there any specific website that?
I'll give you the link. I just don't remember it right now.
I'm going to read an actual question for the final one. It seems like most of sustainability gains are to be had at the data center or hardware level. Are there any concrete changes that should happen in software?
Yeah, there is an assumption baked in there. I'm not sure if data centers are like, oh, yes. Is that a little bit better? That's a lot better. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, I know that, I'm trying to remember the question. So what was the second piece of that?
Sorry, I lost it too.
Okay, it was data centers.
Yeah, it seems like most of
Software.
sustainability gains are to be had at the data center or hardware level. Are
Right.
there any concrete changes that should happen in software?
Gotcha. Yeah. So first off, to like dispel any confusion, when data centers are being presented, there's operational and embodied, and those were kind of the two sides of the coin. And when you divide it up, there's some usage that just goes into the raw hardware, manufacturing it and running it, and then there's also a big cost that goes to software. So I wouldn't say that like most of the gain should happen at the hardware level, although yes, it would be great if every data center could find carbon neutral technology or lower network latency, all of those pieces. But there are so many improvements that can be done at the software level, reducing your compute times, improving your SQL, improving your image optimization, reducing your JavaScript size when you're shipping off to a client's browser, all sorts of pieces that sort of go into that. I don't know if you have perspective on like which pieces are more.
I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but for me the software level is where you think of the solution itself, and it depends. Basically. Whatever you are doing in the software, like yesterday we had this really nice case where you were syncing all those devices together. My question is it okay? It's nice that you can do it, but is it necessary always to have that? Because if you have that kind of an operation and you are syncing it to 10 different devices and you use only one, then there is 9 extra ones. So I think there is a lot of things that we can consider at the software level. That how do we want to operate? What is sufficient? What is necessary? What comes to the user experience? What is for the energy efficiency as such?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have to ask this bonus question because a lot of our speeches are like, okay, TypeScript is quite the default nowadays. But when we discuss about how what's the effect on like which language is the best for the environment, I think TypeScript is quite low on that chart. Do you have any opinions on that?
I mean, compared to JavaScript, there actually was a research study I remember reading. I didn't include it in my talk, but it was comparing, or it was an attempt to compare, language energy usage per computation. But it's really tough when you do, contrived, here's a for loop that iterates over 100 things, and we ran it a bajillion times, and that's how efficient the language is. Usually not. Depends on what the language is actually doing on the hardware. So TypeScript to JavaScript, since TypeScript compiles away, it's going to be about as efficient as JavaScript when it gets to the server and when it gets to the user. So if there's any worry of adding TypeScript to your web development flow, I don't think there's anything there. But for back-end compute, I mean, it can definitely depend. I know if you're using WebAssembly to make sure something like Rust is able to run in an environment, WebAssembly itself has a big bundle size, startup time, compilation cost that can offset some of the benefits that you're getting. So you need to be a little bit skeptical about those improvements. I know that just reducing the amount of time you're using someone else's hardware on AWS, if you wrote that function in Go, it's returning in 50 milliseconds instead of 500, and it's running in the same location, same hardware, everything else is constant, you are going to get an improvement, probably. I mean, if it's introducing bugs because people don't know the language, that's a problem. But if everyone's experienced, they can build good code, you can definitely get a benefit if you know how to hold the tool.
Yeah, so basically saying that it's not so black and white to just see
I
the
said
charts.
So many caveats.
Yeah.
So
Jari, do you
many.
have anything to add?
Not really on that level, just thinking of those different languages from the developer point of view versus the energy efficiency point of view. Some languages and frameworks that you are using might not be energy efficient, but they are developer friendly compared to doing everything in assembler as such. But my background is on parallel computing, and there you actually needed to know what you are doing, not use the tool to do that, all that thing.
Thank you so much, Jari and Ben. Let's go to eat, and we'll be back in 45 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.